Welcome, sales associates, those budding to be sales professionals, and indeed those of you that are now in the space of looking to move into the sales professional role. We are, oh goodness me, moving along. We've now come up to session of Foothold, of course, F119, and today we're going to be talking about the rejuvenation, or if you like, the recalibration. And the recalibration is virtually like looking back where we've come, because what actually happens to us when we get into, especially as being a new profession and learning all of the skills that go with it, we invariably, things start to loosen up. One of the things I've always been observant of, particularly with salespeople, even with their dialogue when they're at listing presentations, but more importantly, as it relates to prospecting, is that over a period of time, you hear something, you learn it, and you take it on board. But invariably, as you start to do it over and over and over again, the screws start to loosen. And the same can happen even with, strategically speaking, even with our overall philosophy, the way that you're looking at it. And from time to time, you just have to come back to the beginning, recalibrate everything that you are looking to do, and I guess evaluate how far you've come and how far you indeed may still have to go. I think this has been spurred on, not least of which has been in and around what we've done by moving all of the recordings onto the YouTube platform. And, you know, for me, I was actually going back over these as they were being uploaded. And it was even a reminder from where I sat to, I guess, remind all of you when you're listening to this, some of the things that you need to take on board. So all the way back to, and this is only just a quick half hour to really get your head around it, I absolutely recommend that you jump onto the recordings on that YouTube channel, the Property Careers YouTube channel. Jump onto the Pröspector School online session, show, whatever we're going to call it, and then just move through them one by one. Certainly those, the early recordings, even this one here, we're still, may not necessarily be transferring visually as well, because we're coming, you know, on a direct camera, an inbuilt camera inside a computer, but the audio is just fine. And listening to what was said on there, this too is just making enormous sense. And I can tell you, with a lot of you that are on here right now, some have just made some remarkable progress. Some of you might have to rethink where you're at. One of the major things I talk about inside of planning, which I'll get to that in just a moment, is that if the plan that you're running is not working, you don't stick with the plan. What you've got to come back and do is rethink, you know, without losing sight of where it is that you want to go, and then rejig the plan before you get back into execution. So often I see people kind of get stuck on where they should be rather than where they should be. They just accept where they are, and then they just get into this complacency and then look at the overall strategy, I believe, incorrectly. Certainly there's been a few different, there's been a few red herrings thrown in there, not least of which in terms of currency, with the advent of lockdowns and restrictive practices that COVID has brought. But, you know, from where I sit, I believe it actually has brought to us opportunity rather than adversity, because if you look at it the right way, you can rely on the fact that a lot of your competitors, those which you are up against every day, they indeed might be kind of sitting back and resting on their laurels. So this creates an opportunity that you can take advantage of. Don't ever lose sight of the strategy. And I'll go through this from the beginning. This is the first recording that we had. You know, the strategy is relatively simple. It's to move through 3 phases, which we now have a 4th, which will be in the introduction of Pröspector, through 3 phases of prospecting to eventually take a 20% market share of a definitive precinct. Now, quite often, I'll be talking to individual salespeople, even sales associates that have been prospecting, and they'll say to me that the leads that I have, the active property sellers that I have on my list, are kind of scattered. Now, I'm not saying don't list those other ones that fall outside your service area, because they're probably in your greater service area anyway. But it does not mean that you shouldn't be also centrically minded about attacking that definitive marketplace. There are so many benefits to actually taking a roughly 30% market share as a player in a marketplace. What do I mean by player? This is just a recap. So basically, it doesn't matter what marketplace I go into, 60 to 90% of it is typically being dominated by 3 agents. Those 3 agents are the players. Each of those players, should they choose to, can enjoy roughly about a 30% share of 60 to 90% of that market. So if you actually have a look at that, that's anything from 20 to as much as 20 to 30% of an overall marketplace. That is quite significant. What this allows me to say to you is that for every 1,000 houses that you go into, you can, on a capacity level, be expectant, should you work it over properly, of 20 sales per 1,000. This is pretty simple. So if you look at it and you say, well, if I've got an area of 3,000 properties that I'm prospecting, I have the capacity to make 60 sales per annum. If that translates to the right dollars and cents, it just makes perfect sense for you to focus on that centric market. Now, given that you have actually focused on it, now we have to look at the strategy by which we have to engage to make that work. Now, so often I've seen real estate agents, they look at it and they say, well, all you got to do is hustle and grind. Well, I tell you to let go of that. You're far better off employing intelligent smarts around this. And that's where you'll start to see, the real dividends pay off. So, so one of the first things I say is you've got to gauge, you've got to get a foothold. Now, if you don't already have a foothold, or you may have engaged in the practice to gain a foothold, but then you've backed off and you've lost that footing. So this just means you've got to reassert it. And certainly if you've done some of the work in the past, to reinvigorate that is not difficult. It is a very simplistic approach that we recommend that you take. So the first thing with foothold is just to become a consideration. And becoming or gaining a foothold in any given market is all about asserting presence. And presence is the thing that you have to be constantly vigilant around. So we say that it all starts with one listing. So if you're not got listings in that particular market, or you found yourself wandering off into other segments of the market and you've left that one alone, it just takes a quick impetus to lift the presence relatively quickly in that marketplace that you're coveting. Don't forget, it's all about asserting it in and around main arterial roads, because people that see that on the main arterial road to frequent those quiet positions, they very simply have to frequent the main roads. If you've got good presence on those main arterial roads, then the assumption is that you have presence everywhere. There's lots of other ways over and above the sign that you can do this. Have you been distributing the image of the sign card? We've talked about that, the postcard. Again, I would just lift that almost straight away. Have you had things like a newsletter? Has that been going out on time, the same day, every day? This is how you assert that, I guess, presence, and then you fall onto the shopping list. And all you got to do then is become a consideration. That's the key component. Once you've done that, if you've had opportunities in and around listings, the next part of the strategy, once you've actually got those seed listings, is to grow more listings off them. Please don't lose sight of the fact that listings beget listings. Now, here's the question I have for you. Have you been guilty, if you don't feel like you're making that progress into that marketplace, have you been guilty of, when you win a listing, of being too focused on getting that property sold? Or have you turned your attention, the moment that you've got a listing, on traction, on turning that one listing into 2 more, and in turn those 2 into 4 more? Now, you really can't take your foot off the accelerator around traction until you've gotten optimal market share. So recognize this. You fought so very hard to get those seed listings. You've got to use those seeds correctly to grow your market share. So the reality is that that one listing then becomes 2. Those 2 then become 4. Now, how do we do this? And you really need to get excited each time you have a listing. Now, I know that, again, that the constraints of COVID have made it difficult to use those listings as the conduit, the ideal conduit they ought to be, because you haven't been able to conduct open for inspections. In some cases, you haven't been able to even get the marketing done or the advertising done to actually project the property out there into the marketplace, not least of which is that you haven't been able to conduct open for inspections. But there's still ways around this, and you still need to be mindful of how you leverage the fact that you have that listing and what you're doing with it. Please understand this. Once you have seed listings, each time you do have one, you now have a voice in that marketplace. And with that voice in place, and I hope that you're recalibrating right now, you just need to be totally obsessed with leveraging off that listing into other listings. I say this over and over again, especially to sales professionals, more importantly to peak performance professionals, is that once you actually start to break into that market and you have listings, you don't have to now look for property sellers. These sellers are already watching you. So when that sign goes up, you need to, even if it develops into a state of healthy paranoia, you have to be mindful of the fact that those next sellers, those incumbent sellers, those opportunities that you can now get from having gotten this listing are going to make their judgments around what message emanates from that listing you've gotten. So you need to become paranoid about what sellers are looking at this. How do I connect with them? When I do connect with them, how do I ensure that the right message gets to them so that this works well? The next phase, of course, once we get there, and look, I can honestly tell you that I don't know many agents, bar a select few, that are at this point, is the state of momentum. Once you've actually reached the optimum market level, you just want to retain that market share. So the analogy that I use, if we come back to, Foothold, it's about starting a fire. That's quite hard work. It's labor intensive. Just to get that spark to graft, getting that seed listing and getting things up and away. In traction, which is like you've got the fire going and you're just putting more fuel on it and building that fire up, there's still a degree of work involved, but not nearly the same amount of work that you had through Foothold. And of course, because you're now begetting through leverage, good quality listings, and income is coming in, you're having a degree of success. Momentum is the one that's missed. This is where you have to be totally vigilant. This is the danger spot where we have a bit of success and we take our eye off the ball. Now, I'm sure there's a number of you listening to this right now that are thinking just that. Have I made the mistake of taking my eye off the ball? Oh, okay. Just need to get rid of this. I don't know why that's... There we go. All right. So that strategy needs to be understood. You need to be very conversant with the idea that your initial objective is to take a 30% market share. Don't be distracted by the listings that come on board and the sales that emanate and get too excited around that. It's normal. Once you've actually got listings, what's going to come? Buyers are going to come to you. And with those buyers are going to come sellers researching the market ahead of selling. So the message that is projected to them is of paramount importance. Then we move through into planning and getting an understanding of how it works. Now, so often when I see salespeople running on a daily basis, they don't run to a specific understanding of a specific plan and how that plan has to unfold. It's a very, very simple process. I don't look at my day around the number of calls that I make. I'm not saying that I won't embrace the idea of making a large number of calls, but I do look more around ensuring that I secure a listing presentation today for the next day. And one of the rules that I've self-imposed upon myself around this is that my passport to leave the office for the day is that I have successfully secured and found a seller moving forward. Now, this is coming to you, this broadcast, if you like, in the last quarter of the year. And it's an interesting time because we're in the middle of what I refer to with the real estate rock stars as Rocktober. And Rocktober is basically the foundation by which you can either successfully bounce into November and December, which we combine into November, or you can fail to bounce into it. And as you get into the middle part of November, you'll then be hearing the bad news where a lot of property sellers start to switch off and move all their thoughts and actions to around next year. They start to delay it. They say, oh, look, it's almost Christmas. I'll wait till after Christmas to do something. This can be devastating to a lot of salespeople because it can break continuity. So Rocktober is the month where you have to set up the bounce, the foundation, where you can bounce beautifully into November, because what I recommend you do, and I'll be talking about this in coming weeks, is that you bring December into November and turn it into a 7-week month, rather than falling for the trap, which a lot of people do in Australia and New Zealand. They basically, the moment they hear December, they start to think Christmas and they go into shutdown or close down. Whereas this way, we can move it all the way through to the last week of the month, to the roughly around the 20th, and just push through with November until we reach that point, and you'll still be listing and selling houses well into that moment. And of course, you get this right, and not only do you bounce into November beautifully, but then you have your break and you will set up perfectly, and we will show you how to do this so that in the new year, you get off to a flying start with definitive inventory, basically listings that you know that are coming on, or you've already got them on, and you get off to a flying start. So what's the key to that? Right now, in Rocktober, you need to be building a list that comprises, as a barest of minimums, 25 active property sellers that you've located in your targeted marketplace, in that market precinct. that you are focusing on. Some call it a farm, whatever it might be. And this is the plan that you need to put in place. So we know the strategy. Part of that planning is to build that list. Once you've gotten that list to 25 as a minimum, again, if you get that to 30, 35, so much the better, you are now in a position on a weekly basis, on a 5-day week, to have, as I would like to see, at least 5 good, solid conversations with active property sellers on a daily basis. And I need to tell you this. What is the fundamental linchpin to enjoying great productivity in the environment that we're in at the moment? Conversations. You can almost hang your hat in terms of productivity, in terms of listing opportunities, in terms of listing presentations, which should be educations, all the way through to winning listings. This will all be fundamentally based on the number of conversations, good conversations, you're having on a daily basis. What should those conversations be about? Well, essentially, they should be motive-centric around active property sellers, then moving or looking for opportunities to level and give advice rather than price. Again, when I look at that planning, and I'll get to the dialogue in just a second, but when I'm looking at that planning, I'm looking at having those 5, and I think, how can I spark? How can I get these conversations running? So often when I'm talking to salespeople in prospecting mode, they are wanting to chase people up, but they kind of run out of things to say. They don't know what to talk about. So for this reason, and this is what we've been harping on about in the last 3 or 4 weeks in and around this series, where I've said, once you've identified the seller, then move to the motive-centric discussions. But importantly, I've said in the passive technique or the passive follow-up, first and foremost, get your property seller's research guide out. Now, if you're sitting there wondering why you don't have good engagement with active property sellers or you can't identify them, those that you have spoken to, did you send the property seller's research guide out to them? Did you automatically then put them, second one, onto the SMS lists where twice a week, no more than twice a week, you are texting them about sales results and people being moved, making sure that those texts are centric to satisfying motives or issues around timing, and staying away from high price, record price, and all those, I guess, passe things that you might be hearing. In the third instance, the brand new one, have you set up and sent out to them a preliminary comparative market analysis with a cover letter that we designed that makes it very, very clear that the price is just subjective. It's just information to give you a platform for engagement so that you can have discussions with them, and that they are welcome to talk with you in and around this. Next one, are you then inviting them out to see your welcome homes, especially if those welcome homes that you have are clearly contrasted against that of the competition? Then are you sending them your accolades? Again, important. Are you sending them examples of your marketing? What we suggest is the 2-view platform, where you can show them, you can offer them an individual property website. Of course, if you're a member of Property Marketer, you can do this. But even showing them how you can run marketing engagement, if necessary, in an off-market fashion, and how this can be accomplished. Are you sending them your recommendations, all of your accolades? And then from there, are you moving into the space where you're now giving them case studies where people have entrusted their sale, the sale of their property to you, the marketing product you recommended and everything else that went with that, and shown them what marketing product was used, how many people come through, what the overall result was, and what those clients had to say about it. Now look at this from the perspective of that prospective seller. You've made contact with them. You've sent them out a property seller's research guide. They're getting texts twice a week. You've sent them out a comparative market analysis. You've also sent a newsletter. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Your market roundup or your monthly newsletter, whatever it is, telling them how the market is and what their property might be worth. You've also invited them to open for inspections, and it doesn't matter if they have come or they haven't come. But all of this engagement is good fodder and a good platform for you when you follow them up to stimulate good engagement, good conversation. So this is part of that strategy. And in that dialogue, you just need to be sure that when you are talking to these people, you are sticking to the point. In fact, go back to part of the strategy. What is the strategy? To find sellers. What is the renewed part of the strategy, one that we're talking about now with the advent of COVID? Not trying to secure listing presentations by solicitation, but instead developing a good personable relationship, giving them good example, good fodder of your marketing, your product, and what you and your company is all about, having good conversations where you are looking for opportunities to give advice rather than information stuck centric to price or making the sale of the property around price. So all this recalibration is causing good engagement. You've got that 25 people. You are talking to them in conversation each and every day, at least 5 of them. That list will now grow. Believe you me, you might not think so, but I say this over and over and over and over again to real estate sales people, sales professionals, sales associates, sales team leaders. It doesn't matter who you are. I openly say this, whatever you focus on grows. I mean, I've had this lesson for me in the last month, where we've started to shift or move all of the training onto the YouTube platform, and it's growing. I'm focused on it, so it's growing. Whatever I focus on grows. It's the same for you. So if you drive your energy and make it centric to identifying a large volume of property sellers, servicing them like there's no tomorrow, looking to make a personable connection with them, focusing again on their motive and making most of the discussions centric to advice rather than price, the invitations will come. And don't ever lose sight of one very important fact, sales associates. Listings beget listings. So the more you list, the more you list. Right now, the more you engage active property sellers, the more active property sellers will be attracted to you. The more you focus on presence in a definitive marketplace, the more likely you are to build that presence inside that definitive marketplace. So again, I say, put your energy into that focus. Now, how do you build that list? Well, that's quite simplistic as well. You just need to be looking in the right places, because active property sellers, and the clues in the first word, active, because they're active, their behavior has them engaging in different places inside the marketplace. So a quick reminder, get back to that sales inquiry log. Be very wary of developing the mortal enemy of any salesperson. And if you are writing this down, I implore you, or even if you're not, I ask you to write it down. What do you think? And I know that we're in the space of the COVID-19 environment. The worst virus that any salesperson can contract is the virus of cynicism. This is where we start saying nobody wants to sell, nobody's really interested in moving, nobody's interested in real estate at the moment. I've actually heard rumors of sales operatives, sales associates, sales people saying that they're calling through inquiry logs and people don't want to do anything. Are you kidding me? Do you think people run a conspiracy where they contact real estate agencies and they have no intention of doing anything? Granted, they may not think it's the right time, but here's the thing. inside any good sales inquiry log, if you or the company you are working with has kept good records of people that have been contacting that agency, whether it be via the internet, whether it be turning up at open for inspections, whether it be calling off signboards, or in some cases the old-fashioned way, whether it be people just turning up to your shop front window and seeing properties in the front. Always understand the people that sit inside where you've recorded their names and numbers, they may not have the capacity at present to buy or sell real estate, but they have a willingness. So if you become cynical about this, you will never discover, you will never open up, you will never lure this willingness out into the open and create good engagement around conversation. And you certainly won't create a personal relationship where they will start to want to invite you in to help them, to assist them with what they're trying to do. You've got to park that cynicism aside and hang on to the fact that all people need is good engagement, good conversation, and this will stimulate the notion that they can achieve that which they're setting out to achieve. I hope this has helped. Recalibrate right now. Really have a look at where you're sitting with your strategy on the marketplace you're trying to attack. Importantly, grab that, get totally obsessed in Rocktober with the idea of building your active property seller list, if you like, your chase list, to a minimum of 25 names. Build a nice little service process around that where you are delivering your product to them, so that when you are having conversation, you have good engagement around things which are pertinent to them and important to them, are not centric to just the price, not centric to just getting the property sold, but centric to satisfying the overall motive. And believe you me, you will set up that bounce for you to finish the year off in style. And as we progress over the next couple of weeks, I can show you how to set up the new year so that you get off to a flying start in the new year, and that you can get your productivity into a level of consistency. And because we've recalibrated, you can get back to coveting a 30% market share as a player of that marketplace that you set out to break in the first place. My name's Mark Dwyer. You can reach me at Mark with a K at propertycareers.com.au, or you're welcome to call me. My mobile is +61 410 592 165. Please